Welcome everyone. I'm so delighted to have you with us today. We have a very special guest today here at MUSEA Atelier in Sonoma, California. Today I'm having tea with a very special muse to us here at MUSEA, Center for Intentional Creativity, and in the world. So I would like to introduce you to Sandy. Hi Sandy.
Hi Shiloh, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be having tea with you today.
Me too.
It's really good. Yes, to all of you. Maybe
Cheers.
Have a cup of tea with us as we celebrate this experience. So we're going to talk today about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, and we are attempting to enroll you into endearing this topic to your hearts as well. Sandy, tell them what we're about to talk about.
We are going to talk about your cellular universe, the world of trillions of invisible creatures that are you.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I love that. We want you to fall in love with that the way that we are, because there's so much to it. And what I've discovered in working with people over these 25 years is we don't have some of the most basic fundamental understanding about our relationship with ourselves and ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't even make them real.
Right.
I mean, they're not real.
Have you even talked to anyone about it?
Other than your phone?
So tell us first a little bit. The bio is right here on the page, so you can read the fine print. But just tell us, what would you like us to know about your background and how you fell in love with the cellular universe?
Okay, that's pretty easy. My background is I've got a PhD in biochemistry, and my dream was to be able to cure all illnesses through better chemistry. And I took a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of California Medical School in immunology, hematology, which was all about cells.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew nothing about cells, even though I'm a chemist. So I chose a project. The chief of the department said, here's a list of programs. Which one do you want to do the research in? It's like, the one that was closest to biochemistry. And it was, fortunately, I chose it. It was about white blood cells. The white blood cells that fight infection. And these are cells you can actually see them doing their work on the microscope slide. And so when I set them up to start studying them, I see these white blood cells in an environment that has a foreign agent, if you will, in it. And it's like, how does this cell know that there's something dangerous, something different in its environment, and to go after it? And it was like amazing to me to see this moving cell embracing what it was doing in this experiment was it was embracing a red blood cell from a sheep. And it just amazed me that these are so smart. And it also took me to the place of, we are not accidentally designed. There's some kind of higher force that has created who we are at all levels. So I fell in love, and I got obsessed with what do cells do? How can I fix their broken parts? And then you learn that we're not just a cellular universe, but that's where we start.
I love that.
Yeah, we've got the emotions and spirit and beyond the physical.
So today, as you're exploring the information, I'm just inviting you to really tune into your own experience and your own relationship with your body and be in a place of discovery with us. And while I have done some research on my own, and of course I have a lot of stories from one of our art matriarchs, Sue Hoya Sellers, as a biological anatomical illustrator, constantly painting and drawing cellular enclosures. And even Lenore Thomas Strauss, her teacher, talked about cellular enclosures. And so I love that we're today going to learn about this together. But I'm going to take a complete beginner's mind, because maybe some of you are there and maybe some of you aren't. But I'm taking the beginner's mind so that we can learn. And I also, Sandy asked, what do I want? Well, I wanted for our community a greater understanding of cells and working with cells and the intelligence of cells. But I also would love a greater access to my own language and capacity to share about it relevant to intentional creativity, because of course we're deep into studying how and why and in what ways intentional creativity can be healing to the body, mind, and spirit. So start at the beginning. We're babies learning. Tell us, what is a cell?
Well, before I start,
Okay.
I'm going to ask the community, take a moment, pencil, pen to paper, draw what you think your cells are like. It doesn't have to be biologically accurate.
Yeah.
Just draw what you feel your cells are. And then I'll tell you a little bit of the story.
So if you don't have a pen and paper, you could also just draw in the air with your finger what I saw, a circle with a series of circles around it.
Okay.
Okay.
So there's not right or wrong.
Yeah, just whatever is
Yeah,
coming up
yeah,
for you. Yeah.
And so for you to understand about your cells, the first thing, when I first started teaching about cells, I had to make them tangible because most people, it's abstract. Your cellular universe, what does that mean? I've got trillions of cells that are in community and collaboration. Well, the first thing is, the idea came from David Deamer, a scientist, astrobiologist at UC Santa Cruz, who said, life needs a place. So if there wasn't a place for the genes to go, there would be no life. So life is a container. Each cell is a container. And something to understand about cells, they're not rigid. This is a salad bowl. They're not rigid. Everything moves. Everything moves in this cell. We've got, do I want to go into we've got the markers of identity, passwords on the outside of the cell. So the outside of the cell membrane, is thinner than a strand of one hair. And this membrane has receptors, antenna, for picking up information. What are you feeling? Are you feeling afraid? Are you feeling happy? Who are you? All of these are on the outside of the cell. But having the antenna like a radio, having the radio on isn't enough to get the cell into action. So the real stuff,
They're moving on their own as usual.
The real stuff is what's inside the cell. So one of the things I think is the most important is, just because our internal pharmacy is sending out molecules of fear or anxiety, or happiness, what's really happening is what's happening in the structure of our cells. So if we're feeling fearful, the cells constrict, they get tighter, and we have this fabric in the cell, which to me is the most important thing for you guys to learn about. The fabric in the cell, it's a matrix, it's a webbing, and it connects inside and outside, and it controls which genes are expressed. It controls everything that we're doing at a cellular level. And the one thing I want to have you make some sense with me is, we've all talked about the molecular changes, our internal pharmacy that influences what a cell can do and become. But in fact, it's the mechanobiology, the tension, structure, stretching, releasing part of the cell, which is controlled by this called the cytoskeleton, that actually acts much faster. So if we're doing something, I want to release my stress and I'm going to go into a state of meditation, I'm bringing in more oxygen and feeding the cells, but in fact, what's even more important is stretching your arm out, taking your pencil, paintbrush, because the physical is the most important to change us at a cellular level, and we are physically cells.
I love that, and we talk about that a lot in our work with intentional creativity. As I say, like, You can make all the changes you want in your mind. You can even talk to someone about it. You can even feel it in your energy. But if you don't actually do something biologically, somatically, then it likely won't stick. There's like something like we don't believe ourselves if we're not taking some action.
Exactly. It's cellular somatics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what we have to be doing.
Yes.
It's not just in our mind. I mean, it's harder to change our mind. I don't have to tell you that.
Yeah.
It's harder to change our mind than to change our body.
Yeah.
But we can stand up, we can stretch, we can dance, we can do qigong, we can do yoga. All of those kind of practices activate our cells much quicker than thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the, I guess I really am a physical person. If I think about it physically, if you want to change a habit or a behavior, it's to, and change our brain, if we use our senses, that helps train the cells what they can do. For instance, if I want to set up the habit of painting every day, or like doing, painting every day, but I'm reluctant. It's like I'm not going to give myself that gift or that reward.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I paint, now I'm going to smell the paint maybe, or I'm going to always, like we do with a painting, perhaps put essential oil on the paper. So that smell of the essential oil is going to activate the brain.
So bring sensuality into it.
Well, also the brain, we have these 5 physical senses. And so the brain is then activated to movement. This part of the brain is movement. And this part of the brain is smell. Movement and touch are in the same place. We're playing music to be painting. So all of those sensory activators are engaging the cells at a network. They're networking. The cells in the brain are networking, and so that you've got this memory. Okay, every time I smell lavender on the paper, I'm brought into this place of peace, a new habit. You can do it for meditation. You can do it for changing what you eat, but to see that we can change our brain with pleasure, with the senses, and the body learns. The cells learn through the senses. The cells learn. One of my mantras is, the cells don't know the difference, nor does the brain, between what's real and imagined. So it's like to make it real. I mean, it doesn't have to be real. Even in using imagery for healing, biologically, it doesn't have to be real. So where do I want to go with that?
Well, actually, we had talked about this before because I wanted us to challenge this idea a little bit about, okay, so when we think about it, when we think about something, we're visualizing feeling better, but then we don't take a somatic action, and the word around town is the brain doesn't know the difference between you taking that walk or visualizing taking that walk, because the same part of the brain lights up. But as in what I've been really looking at and experiencing and teaching about, because of the senses, the brain does know the difference. It might be the same place that's lighting up, but it's not being experienced the same way. And I worry that we're actually, like we're imagining going for a walk, but we're not actually going for a walk to feel better. I feel like it's creating almost this distrust because there's this vacuum that you're in. You're not smelling the grass. So I started to wonder, and that's one of the things I wanted to bring to you, because I started to wonder, like, how intentional creativity, like that action of being with the paint and being with the canvas and, touching the water on our hands, how can that really amplify the making it real part?
Well, you reminded me, years ago I trained with Anna Halpern.
I love Anna Halpern.
And we did this, it was painting what we're feeling and standing up what we're feeling. It was working with men with AIDS. And I can remember this man was saying, I'm a warrior. He painted that he was a warrior. I'm a warrior and I'm strong. And it wasn't until we witnessed him, and that was important part of it, witness him as becoming this warrior. So embodying it. So we have to embody it in a way that, yes, imagination is, and cells are important, but making it real.
Yes. I think about, if you haven't heard the story of Anna Halpern with her working with her cancer and painting it and dancing it and having it witnessed and her experience with that. I mean, do you want to speak to that a little bit, because you know that story?
Well, what's interesting about Anna, she was a modern dancer,
Yes.
you know that. And she had a dream that there was a black ball in her gut. And ultimately, so the dream gave her that information. And then ultimately she went to the physician, discovered that in fact she had colon cancer. Here she's a modern dancer with Martha Graham. I mean, a serious, beautiful young woman, having to have her colon taken out and needing a bag, colostomy bag, and then she gets a remission, goes into
Recurrence.
remission and then relapse.
Yeah.
And so what happened is she decided to dance the emotions around her relapse.
Yes.
And paint it, and ultimately gave up becoming a modern dancer and using an intentional creativity way back when
Yep.
for cancer patients. So
And cured herself and lived until very recently.
she died at 101 or something.
Yeah. So it's such a powerful story. There's even footage of it online. And when I heard that story, and stories like that, I just get so fortified, because it's like, right, so there was the story, there was the intention, there was the action, the painting, the image, the embodiment, and though the witness was so important, and she healed herself. And I'm not saying that that happens every single time, but that time it did. So I want to honor that these actions and these things that we're talking about regarding healing, it doesn't happen every single time, but it happens enough of the time that we should at least, I think, try, right?
Well, it's also looking at what's healing all about.
Yes.
Is healing just getting the physical fixed? Or we have our spirit, our mind, our emotions that need to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
And am I doing something? Am I feeling helpless or hopeless? Or
Right.
I'm able to manage this with doing whatever I need to do, because the cells want you to do that.
So when you imagine, for example, that ritual with Anna Halpern for healing, what are the cells doing while she's doing that?
Well, if you think about, we've got trillions,
Yeah.
and they're all in communication with each other.
Yeah.
They're connected. They collaborate. They listen. So they're listening, and they need to listen to each other to be able to take care of this vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I like to think they're happy when we're doing that.
Yeah.
They're sending out the molecules of I'm taking care of myself, and this whole mechanobiology, which is pretty new these days, we're taking it into the physical. We're not just, a lot of spiritual traditions were divorcing
Right.
ourselves from the body. It's
I
like,
think
no.
that's dangerous personally.
Yeah.
Personal opinion, but
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe we need to descend into connection with the earth and instead of ascend past the body.
Absolutely.
Like,
it's the only vehicle we've got that we know of in this lifetime. What else do I want to say?
Yeah, what do you have in here? I
Okay.
mean, there's like a wine cork and some bouncy balls that light up.
Well, the bouncy ball, so talk about energy. All the cells have divine energy as well as molecular energy. They speak to each other. Actually, they have a structure inside that they can read each other's energy. They can actually detect infrared energy from
Is
other
it because
cells.
they're in this together?
Well, this kind of helps organize.
So the matrix organizes.
The matrix organizes, and the matrix is made of strings, struts, and tubes. You might know microtubules. So this brings us some strange structures. We've got these strange structures of microtubules. You're never going to remember this, but you might remember that some scientists believe that the microtubules are where consciousness goes through. That microtubules in the brain the neurons, are what consciousness is going through. Because when people get general anesthesia, they don't have regular consciousness.
Right.
And what happens is the microtubules are frozen or broken with general anesthesia. But every cell in the body has microtubules.
Mm-hmm.
So every cell then, in my interpretation, has consciousness.
Yes.
There's a mind in every cell. And I think if we understand that, we can have more of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the brain directing us.
Mm-hmm.
Every cell has a consciousness, and there's a very exciting work that came with the people who got heart transplants.
Yes.
So people with heart transplants inherited the consciousness or the likes and dislikes of where the heart was donated from. Where is that information?
Well, that's a good question, because it makes me think about, I always thought it was in the fields of the heart and the fields of the organs. So if there's this soma, and then this is matter-like, and then this is energy and wave-like,
Right.
that the heart, because of the electromagnetic field, is able to see and perceive with a kind of precognition. Before the eyes even see it, sees it out here. And so I always wondered with those studies of the heart, because I read about those too, which just blew my mind and actually gives me faith in humanity somehow that we can even do that. But that the heart is carrying both the pre-existent, propensities, both biologically, but also that the field is carrying, because the field is carrying the memories. So the field is like registering the image sensory memories, where the physical part is sort of holding the data for that potential. And so there's like a local, non-local. That was what I was thinking.
That's a good idea.
Isn't it possible?
Because I've never really figured out, well, where is that memory?
Right.
What I was thinking about in terms was, it was in the DNA, as the spiral. Mm-hmm. It was in the energy between the strands.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels like it's both. We talk a lot about coherence in the community, and about wanting to have this relationship between this and this. And sometimes when I've worked with shamans in the past, one of the things they say is, well, is the problem located in the body or the field? Let's find out, and then we'll know how to work. And I'm always like, let's work in both, no matter where the problem is. There's this idea of like these coordinates. So now my cell image is like, it's like there's these coordinates out in the field. So the local part of the cell now connected to the non-local part of the cell, and they're registering information differently. But when they're disconnected, we have problems.
Yeah, they can't talk to each other.
They can't talk. I think that's one of our biggest problems on the planet today, actually, is that who we are out here is not who we are in here. So we have dissonance and then lack of communication.
And we're afraid to talk.
We're afraid.
We're afraid.
Yeah.
How are you gonna judge me? How are you gonna change my field? Are you gonna hate me, not like me,
Right.
beat me up? Yeah, it's all about communication. And how the cells work, not separate from the heart, but how the cells work. I've been thinking about it in terms of design.
Yes.
The cells work by recognizing patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So they recognize patterns of molecules. If they recognize a microbe, it's because of the molecules on the outside, and also the shape of things influence what a cell can recognize. So there are principles of design that I wanted to cover for artists in IC community. So the principles of design, as I started at the beginning, was saying we've got these receptor sites on the outside of the cell that picks up information. And some of you have probably read Bruce Lipton's book, and you're familiar with the idea of a lock and key. That's how we were taught how the cell works. Well, it's not a lock and key. It's actually, here's the molecule, here's the receptor. The receptor has to embrace the molecule. They're not fixed.
Yeah.
So there's movement in everything the cell does. So that's another reason why we need to move, because we're changing the field. We're changing the field.
And so that was a thought that existed for a long time that changed recently with Bruce Lipton and other work, that they recognized it wasn't a lock and key, but actually that it was a relationship, an embrace relationship that wasn't static, wasn't just fixed, right?
Yeah, it's all about embrace.
Yeah. And it seems so relevant, like when you think of that just energetically, the difference of between like insert A, item A into slot B, like that's real different than an embracing of A and B, right? That there's actually collaboration. And it just makes me think about how we were taught for so long that the heart is like this valve pump machine, right? And how different it is now that we understand how it works more, although there's still so much mystery, but like changing from that mechanistic view of the human system and changing from, I think of like changing from what I call Aristotle and the boys and Newtonian philosophy, like those headsets are so ingrained in ourselves. How do we make these shifts in awareness so that we can start to understand more of this amazing relationship with who we are?
Well, it's interesting because recently I read something that biochemistry is all about relationships, even though we're talking about isolated molecules. And a theologian and scientist, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin,
I love Pierre.
He said,
Chardin, yeah.
The tendency for molecules to embrace gives us the ability to love in higher ups. So it's all about embrace. It's all about movement in terms of patterns, in terms of what the cell can do.
Oh, I love that. Makes me think of that Chardin quote about that there's almost a sensual longing in us to be connected to ideas and dreams that are bigger than the ones that we have for ourselves.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's making me think about this though too, of just like this, what we're doing with you all, of wanting to share with you our love of this beautiful biological temple and energetic temple, so that we can shift our orientation to our relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, and I always think of it, like what you're saying is, I always think of it in terms of self-care.
I love that.
How can we take advantage of the wisdom and the stuff of ourselves for self-care? And I'm going to make this simple. I don't know if I'm making it simple or not, because I always go into design.
I love that. We're artists. We love design. Go for it.
Okay. So the way our cells, notice I took 3 tubes. The evolution of our cells at a biological perspective and at a spiritual perspective is built on threes, on triads, trinity, if you will. DNA code is 3 letters out of a possible 4. When we get into the embryo stage, it's 3 layers that give rise to our cellular universe. The original story of the brain was it's a triune brain, 3 different layers. So it became, we've got this threesome. And then there's a controller in the cell, something called, you won't have to remember the name, the centriole. And the centriole is a really weird construction. I'm sure it came down from this heaven someplace. It's a weird construction. There are 2 of these in the cell, and they're built from 9 series of 3 tubes. So there's 27 tubes in each one of these centrioles that direct the cell, which is up and down, that when the cell goes through division, they're kind of deciding which new cell they go into. And then there's all this consciousness in these microtubules that's going from consciousness to cell. I know that's pretty far out, but...
No, I think that's fantastic. I'm loving hearing about it. I think that the way I think about life is sacred math, and that when things are introduced like that are toxic, basically we're breaking the sacred math, and when there's illness, our body's ability to solve the equations of toxicity that we're receiving is can't solve the equation, and then tries to go into attack mode instead of resolution mode. And so for me, the whole thing is sacred math, or what breaks the math. And you, in order to take beautiful things apart and make chemicals that are not good and toxicity, you're breaking math and then reconfiguring things to become something else, to emulate something that the body and nature did naturally. Now it's a foreign thing, and now we don't recognize it. And so I think about that with things like 5G or something. Like, I was so freaked out because I was like, my body does not know what to do with that information. And I was so freaked out about it that I had to just say to myself, there is no avoiding 5G now. This is right when it was first starting. And I just said, body, I know you do not want that information. And we have to learn to move around it and with it and go, hey, I see you. I know what you are. And you're just here now, and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm going to ask my cellular structure to be with this thing that feels horrible to me, and actually change my relationship, because now we're traveling together. And that was the only way I could get my system to calm down.
So you communicated with your cells.
I did.
And felt you were more in control,
Yes.
rather than something's going to bombard me.
Yeah.
I'm going to handle
Yeah.
myself. Yeah, you're giving him a different message.
A different message. I did the same thing when I had COVID, and even before I had it, I asked to see it, to really see what it, like, show me what you look like so I can navigate with you, you know?
And you saw it?
I did see it. And I said to Jonathan and some other people in our community what I thought it was doing and how I thought it was traveling, because I saw an image, and everyone said, there's no way it can be like that. But I was focused on the aerosol model and the way that it was moving and spiking and the way that it traveled like dandelions. And I was like, I mean, I have a message I wrote to an immunobiologist, like, I think this is why it's, you know, and I'm not saying like I had the thing, but I saw the image. And so my relationship with when I was going through it physically was to be with the image and allow my system to work with the shape, the design, and how do we work with this design, you know? So I'm right with you on the design thing.
Well, that's important. I mean,
Yeah.
It's important to have that kind of relationship. And, you know, I got into with the COVID, it's like, this virus has a consciousness.
Yes.
It definitely has a consciousness. How does it know to turn off some of the immune reactions and turn up other ones? Like, where is that?
Yeah. And respect, I think, you know, have some respect for this.
Yeah, well, we need to do that.
Yes.
And the reason I mentioned the three, not to just get into the anatomics of the cell, is looking at the threesome for doing practices. Because you're talking about the sacred math or mathematics. You've got the threesome, the triad. Do everything in threes. For one of the stories about three is you don't get completion until you have threes. It's not the A-B. It's the ABCs. It's not 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3. And we've got a lot of sacred traditions that are also based on three. So if you decide you want to do a new practice in terms of moving your body, do 3 activities. So you have a sense of completion, creation and completion. I always try to teach that.
Well, what else is in here? What do these represent?
Well, this is our love of wine.
We are here
Yeah,
broadcasting about
yeah.
cells in wine country.
So the man, Robert Hooke, hundreds of years ago, who gave us the word cell, was looking at cork. And what he was seeing was really the walls, dead cells. He wasn't looking at cells at all. He was looking at a bunch of dead walls, cork walls. But it gave us a language. because we each need a language for what's going on. Do I want to talk about this? Yeah, I want
let's talk about it. Look at this. Look what's in her little salad bowl. I mean, this is a pretty divine, previously pincushion perhaps, but
I don't know what it was.
a Christmas ornament or a pincushion, who can say? Okay.
It's kind of hard. So, I mean, I wanted to really give practical skills from ourselves. And one is, how much energy are you feeling tired? I mean, I'm in a state of exhaustion today. Sorry. I've spent 3 days with grandsons, walking up hills, walking 3 miles, 22 flights, so I'm still not recovered. So one of the things that happens at a cellular level, we've got these, actually they are creatures inside our cell called mitochondria. You've got, and mitochondria, the genes for this, I'm going a little out there, the genes for this come from our moms. But one of the things that is practical, when we're stressed and exhausted and we're not recovering ourselves, we're not taking the time to recover ourselves, the mitochondria can't really function and make energy. So these are what make energy at a cellular level, to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so, if you're feeling tired all the time, or like now, you need to find ways to release the stress. So stress is constriction, contraction, tightness at the cellular level. Cells can't bring in much oxygen, and they become very inefficient in making energy. And so, and if we think of contraction, then we go back to this part of the cell. I want to give you one other important part of this.
Okay.
Beside it attaching to the receptors, it controls genetic expression. And when I read this decades ago, I'd never heard the term tensegrity. Probably you
Say
don't.
it again?
Tensegrity.
No, I've never heard it.
It's balancing. It's a practice of balancing energy inside forces. Buckminster Fuller gave us that word.
Oh, I love Buckminster Fuller.
And so, what Donald Ingbar, a scientist at Harvard, discovered. Cells in our body all have the same genes, by the way. That isn't his discovery, but just so you know. They all have the same genes, but some genes are turned off. It's like we were talking earlier. The liver cells don't need the heart genes, but they still carry them, so those genes are turned off. And there's a field now called epigenetics that shows us lifestyle, how to turn genes on and off. What Ingbar showed, because I'm going to really play big on movement in the body, Ingbar showed if he put cells in a plastic dish, they have to stretch out to grow. And so that triggers the grow gene, the reproductive gene. And then so where in real life do we have that? If we have a cut, cells have to fill the cut. So if the cells now, they fill the dish, they let go of some of the tension, and they turn off grow genes, and now they're mature genes. So an example, if we get a viral infection, the signal is to make more cells that recognize that virus. Reproduce, grow. Now the signal gets, oh, you got enough cells now. Now these cells need to be able to mature and do their job. So if their lymphocytes or white blood cells make antibodies or make proteins that will get rid of the virus, what have you, so they mature. And then in the dish we could see, too long? Oh no.
You're good.
Oh. In the dish we could see that once the dish is filled up and the cells have matured, the cells start letting go of the tension, and the gene that's expressed is self-suicide, cell death.
Oh my gosh.
So it's all the same cells. It's just the amount of tension on the cells that's influencing which genes are expressed.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about us doing the movement, we're giving ourselves that room. We're expanding our dish.
We're expanding our dish, we're stretching, and we're letting go.
Yeah.
So letting go is a big part of it.
Yeah. Okay, tell us again about the letting go part. So it's stretch out to the container, and then there's a letting go, and it becomes mature.
Yeah.
But what about if the bowl expands?
If the bowl expands, well, it depends on the signal they get.
Can they turn it on to grow again?
In the dish, if there's enough food left, yeah, they could.
Okay.
They could.
Yeah, because I just keep thinking about our relationship with creativity and movement, and how we've really witnessed so much amazing healing when people create, regarding all kinds of both physiological, spiritual, emotional, like things just start healing. I mean, like not everything and not all the time, but like a lot, where we're like, that person just looks totally different. Or we always tell a story about Tina Green, who said, I realized for several months I forgot to be hard on myself because I was just focusing on painting, and I've had that problem my whole life. And so we've heard so many stories where people, it's like they almost forget the story they were telling before because their whole self is now in this whole new world, and they just didn't need to do that again or treat themselves that way again. And so it just makes me think about how all this stuff is happening cellularly when we're creating. And people often ask me, like, gosh, how do you have so much energy? Because I really have a lot of energy and a lot of capacity. And I'm just like, I think it's just creativity. Like, I create and I get renewed. I create and I get renewed. And I do get tired, but I do sleep. And, so I feel like I have just an amazing amount of energy. And I know that there's a problem when I run out of energy, which happened this last summer. So I was like, okay, gave me so much compassion for how people feel when they say they don't have energy, because I was like, I got nothing going, I can't move, So what do you think is happening when people are painting or creating? Because you've been painting with us for a while now. You've been creative your whole life, but you're really bringing it into painting on a new level. What is happening in the cellular communication when someone's practicing not just creativity, but intentional creativity?
Well, I mean, what you're saying is amazing, because think about it. When we're painting, when we're in that state of flow, if we're painting, doing something creative, we've let go of everything else that could be occupying our mind and our energy. It's like one of my cell mantras is, cells are always in the now.
Yeah.
And the only thing that takes them out of now is what's going on up here.
Right.
So when we're in intentional creativity, even if it's just at the morning cafe, I've let go. I'm not into my everyday caca.
Hashtag everyday caca.
Yeah. And it's giving, it's in the psychology terms, people are talking about letting go of the past and doing that. Not so easy.
No.
But at a biological, it's easy because the cells are doing it all the time.
Yeah.
The cells are letting go all the time. And so when we're doing paint, I'm going to go home and paint.
I'm going to paint too today.
Okay. When we're able to do that, we're in this, I would say we're in the state of flow, and it's able to generate
It's
all
generative.
the energy. It's generative. It's all the energy we need.
And it feels like it goes to all the places that need it in that moment. And I've experimented with it with all kinds of different things. Like certainly, like I would say when I, like during a menstruation cycle where I was like, oh, it's just so horrible. I just had the worst cramps, and I'm like, well, I could watch a really intense movie, which sometimes would help. And I was like, I'm gonna bring, intentional creativity to the test. And sure enough, I would forget. And I thought it was so interesting because as soon as I would remember that I forgot, I felt it again. And so I asked myself, well, was it gone and I just wasn't paying any attention to it? Or was it happening and I wasn't paying attention? I never figured it out because as soon as I look, it's like an electron. It does something else, right? But that idea of that you could even get a short cycles of pain relief. We did a survey in the community and asked, do you experience, those of you who have chronic pain, do you experience a cessation of chronic pain and get a relief? And over 80% of the people said they did. And so that's part of why I've spent so much time talking about this and why Jonathan and I talk so much about how it works, because we want to be able to, so much of what that's been happening has been spontaneous, right? What we want to do is be able to duplicate what's working so that we can, you know, this is where I get bogged down a little bit in the science and repetition. I saw her make that expression. But if someone's in crisis in your life and you have a go-to that you know worked for the last 3 people, then you have a capacity to bring that presence to that moment. And that's why it's important for me to understand, like, oh, if I do this practice, they could drop into more presence in 3 minutes. But this other practice is going to take an hour to get into flow. And so that's why I am quantifying it and asking what's happened at the level of cells and genes, because people need help and we want to offer it.
Well, what I will add to you is humming.
Humming, yes.
Humming. Because if you want a quick fix, I've never tried humming during painting. What I do see makes a difference is what's the music?
Totally.
What's the field of music I'm listening to? And again, we're string instruments, folks. I mean, just think about, we're musical instruments, and the more we can tune ourselves, the better. And I always teach hum. I
love that. And that's the vibration and the whole body's responding. You make me think I go to this dentist, and I had this one bad experience with him. And the next time I came in, he immediately started humming, and he's working on me, and he's humming. I'm like, this is a strategy to co-regulate. So, and it did help. So I thought that was interesting. Well, what would you say to our community? Because you're not our audience. You're not a bystander. You're a part of everything. In fact, you're with us right now. What would you say to us about what you call romancing ourselves? Like this, you have this almost anthropomorphic relationship. And so tell us, how could we begin to romance or self-care ourselves if someone's never done that before? What could we do?
Well, what can we do? Start going.
Dating. We're going to date ourselves.
Yeah, take yourself out for a walk. I mean,
Love it.
Yeah. And to really start having a connection with who we are. I mean, it's easy to ignore the physical body. It's easy to ignore what we don't see. I can't see my cells. They're just doing their stuff. But if we start having a conversation, even painting, doing a whole thing on painting, it's like when you did the oracle guided visualization, that to me was just like going into your cells. So if we start going in and listening, and part of it is having gratitude for who we are and what we are. That's what it's all about. We need gratitude to give ourselves a painting time.
True.
You know, it's how do we take care of ourselves?
Yes. So do you feel like if we're taking care of ourselves, that our cells are being more taken care of?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think we're not sending them the molecules of stress. Like, okay, I'm giving them pleasure. There's a whole theory in healthcare about the pleasure principle. Don't think about, oh, I have to floss my teeth, but oh, how good do my gums feel? You know, to have focus on something that, how good does this feel? How good does it feel to go for a walk?
Yeah, I love that, and that's one of those paradoxes I think of healing too, because I always say that we need to practice pleasure in order to navigate pain. And without choosing to move toward pleasure and to acknowledge in the moment, just having a beautiful teacup is pleasure, how that we won't have the resiliency we need when the pain comes. Because we won't have practice. But now when pain comes, it's not like I try to avoid the pain. I feel the pain first, but then I say, can I feel this while I'm taking a bath? Right? Or can I feel this at the canvas? How can I mediate that pain and say, I see you, I feel you, and we're going to do something else. We're going to move things around so it doesn't get all coagulated. So, you know, inviting that self-care.
Well, inviting the conversation with what's going on inside and not being strangers to our body.
Yeah.
And do we deserve pleasure? And can we see things more of, I'm giving myself the good time rather than seeing it as, oh, I have to.
Right.
Rather than,
And it's like we're talking about approach, and yet from an epigenetic perspective, when you change your approach, your whole body is going to respond to that change, right? That was something that Sue taught me when one time she said, we're going to go get some driftwood, and we're going to haul it up, and we're going to go carve it. And I was like, okay, I thought we were going to make art. She's like, we are. And she picks this impossible log that neither one of us could carry. And so she said, well, what we're going to, I'm like, we can never lift that. And she's like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to just turn it over on end, and we're going to rest on every step. Some of you have been down at the end of Main Street in Mendocino. It's that beach down below. And so she would just be like, and then we would have to rest. And I was like, this is going to take all day. And she's like, yep. And I was like, what are we doing? I thought we were making art. You know, I'm so young and impatient. She's like, we are. Relax. This is luxurious. Enjoy yourself. And I was like, oh, I'm annoyed. And then I was like, okay. And I can see us like in an image standing like from above view, like standing on those steps as I relaxed into what it would take to spend the day rolling a log with the person you love up the hill. But it was approach, and then I stopped being in resistance, and I started enjoying every move. And that's a big part of her teaching, was like, enjoy this labor, work your body, enjoy this work, you know, don't resist this. And so we go to our art to be at it, to work at it, to work at our craft, and to treat it with that level of care, and our whole body is responding to that.
Absolutely. You're changing. I mean, it's like, again, once you change your perception, it's like, oh, this is so hard, versus, look, it's moved 5 feet ahead of us.
Right.
I mean, it's all about perception. I mean, the whole physiology of stress, it's not an event, it's how you perceive it.
Oh, gosh.
It's how you're looking at it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay.
Do you have any advice for us about if we are feeling stressed, or we do have a negative pattern, or we keep moving into a victim mode, and you know it's comfortable for us because it's a pattern, right? We sort of sink into that pattern. How we could work with ourselves and our approach to shift something? Well, we say, well, that stress is very real. What would you? How could we begin to work with that?
Well, one way is reframe that this is awful to how can I manage it? But I'm always thinking of quick fixes.
Mm-hmm.
And the quick fix that I go to and have seen so many of my students benefit from, I talk about the hum. And the hum is, Jonathan Goldman wrote a wonderful book a couple of years ago, The Humming Effect.
Mm.
And what he did was find all the physiologic benefits of humming.
Mm-hmm.
I used to teach humming because it was to help recover the sense of self from a psychologist in Wisconsin without knowing the physiology. And so what Jonathan has shown, that when we hum for 3 minutes, I mean, we're not talking about doing a whole lot. Hum for 3 minutes, you're changing the stress hormones, you're changing your heart rate, you're changing the production of endorphins, which reduces pain. And one story I always like to tell, because I didn't know the physiology until his book came out. And I remember I was doing my first stress class online. And one of the students was a nurse, an energy practitioner, who did all kinds of things and could never quiet her mind. Like, I know everything, you know, I do it all. And she could never shut that mind off. And she said, doing 3 minutes of humming, which is, it's not humming a song, it's really simple. She said, it was the only thing that quieted my mind. How many years later? So when I sit down at my morning cafe, the first thing I do, besides light a candle, I do a couple minutes of humming just to bring myself present. And if I hadn't seen so many people benefit from it, I wouldn't mention it.
Can you demonstrate for us?
Sure.
So just so that we could also start humming and painting.
Okay. So so close your eyes. Feel your body on the chair. And when you're humming, you're going to do it with a closed mouth. So we'll do 3 hums. So take a deep breath in, And with your mouth closed. And another one. One more.
Wear the perfect dress. I have my bees on today. That was fantastic. I love that. Thank you so much.
No more musical instruments. So.
I love that.
Yeah.
The body as a musical
Yeah.
instrument.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yep.
And with intentional creativity, we always say, like, when people say, what's the difference between creativity and intentional creativity? Is it all creativity? Yes. But I always say, like, when you are, like, if you were painting a mountain and you were just painting to duplicate the mountain, that's creativity. But if you are painting to amplify your relationship and respect with the mountain, if you're asking the mountain not what exact color of green is that, but how does the mountain feel in my body? All of those kinds of inquiries and approaches where we're not trying to duplicate nature to be with, that brings a level of intention. So that doesn't mean that you can duplicate the mountain, or the green mountain could become purple in your soul, and that could be an expression of the mountain. So the difference is the approach of intention and ultimately relationship with either the internal mountain or the external mountain, because there's both. And so I always say, like, intentional creativity paintings are a big combination of, like, what we know and see out here and then what we know and see in here. And our paintings are like a hybrid of inner world and outer world. And that's one of the things I always talk to parents about who are working with kids, is to help them have a clear understanding of an inner world of imagery that's specific to them, and an outer world of imagery that other people also see, and that your art is both of them together.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I mean, what you just said was like, well, then we're doing intentional cellular creativity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
Well, how else do you feel? You know your cells. You have to feel them. You have to get inside.
And we can forget that inside and spend many years not being in relationship with the inside. And I was thinking about what you were saying about the cells as being a container. And notice how we as humans are continually talking about our body as a container without knowing that that's what we're doing. I'm up to here. I feel so full. I'm going to explode. I feel invaded. So it's making me, I've always wondered, why do we do that? It's a linguistic abstraction that's mirrored in our sense of self, but no one taught us, you're a vessel, speak about yourself as a vessel. Well, we know that. But now I'm really thinking of that it's this container of cells that is a container of cells that's a container of cells.
That's a sanctuary. It's a sanctuary. I mean, each cell has a divine spark. So it's not just simply a container. We're bigger than that. We are a temple, like you were saying earlier. We're a temple, we're a sanctuary.
Tell us about that sacred spark, and this can be our, and then we'll come to completion.
Okay. I always talk about origins. That's part of any cell class. Where do we come from? We came from the stardust. And scientists in the 50s, I thought it was a metaphor that we come from the stardust, but it's not, as you both know. But in the 50s, scientists knew the chemicals that were present at the start of life. And they, in the laboratory, brought the chemicals together and put an electric spark to see, could they get life? So even with the chemicals, even with this artificial electrical spark, they couldn't get life. And so the only thing that gives us life is the divine. That's how I explain it.
So you think, like, or that each one of the cells has like a spark from the fire of the divine heart.
Yeah.
Or how would you say it?
I would say that each cell has a smidgen of divinity. That's
It's a homeopathic divinity.
Yeah. We each have that.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is one of the reasons to really get into your cellular universe, to see that we are sacred. I mean, not just words out there, but to feel it intentionally. Feel it. Like every painting in here is sacred. There's no question to me. So we each have the divine spark. Whether that's a soul, I don't know.
Yeah, Sue would say that we are sacred beings, and therefore our art is sacred. You know, and we're sitting at the feast table of love right now, and this is when I think about, now Sue put love in this table, and now we're sitting at the table 20 years later.
She made this?
She made this.
Wow.
This is the subject of my recent book, The Feast Table of Love. And I think, now, if someone sits at this table and they don't know there's love in it, will they be able to feel it? But if we have awareness that her fingerprints and her love for us in the future were in this table, does the body come to life? Does the table whir into action? Because it's like, oh, these ones are paying attention. So I don't know. But I think about that a lot, like how matter is imbued with this nonlinear time love.
Yeah, I could feel it. I mean, can't you feel it when you eat a meal, when someone has cooked it with love?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I can feel that. Like when I eat Jonathan's food, I never feel like food. I'm very reactive to food. When Jonathan makes food, it's like a pure expression of love. Like I just feel blissful. I just feel like laughing, you know? And so it's like, that love is real, you know? So, so we're broadcasting to you from the Feast Table of Love, having our tea, talking about ourselves and our communication. So we send you blessings, each one of you. I hope you've enjoyed our time. I know I've enjoyed our time,
too.
Sandy. Until we meet again.
Until then.
Woohoo!
Oh, good. I thought you were going to get it right in there. Oh.